Hi, everyone. This is our first chapter about what is development. So let's get into it. The beginning of chapter one. So, what is development? Well, it's kind of a three-part process, which we'll see in three domains here in just a minute. So, it's growth, right? From birth onward, we physically grow. We change from infants to toddlers, etc. We mature, again, not only physically, but also intellectually. Our cognitive abilities get stronger as we get older, and we learn from our experiences with our relationships and with the environment, our social aspect. And again, those three domains, especially in our textbook, are referred to as physical, cognitive, and emotional and social. So, when you think of domains, you want to think about how we change within those areas and it throughout our whole life cycle. So, physically, again, our body size, our proportion, our appearance, how our body systems function change as we get older. What about motor capacities? We'll talk about things like fine and gross motor. That falls under the physical domain. Now, the cognitive domain is our changes in our intellectual abilities or our thinking capabilities. Things like processing information and comprehension, memory. So it looks small, but that's actually a very large domain. And the third domain is a two-part, right? It's the emotional part of the child, their emotional communication, self-understanding, again, our development of our own emotions, but within a social context. So, our relationships, our interpersonal skills, and how those come together, again, at times can lead to different outcomes. So, how can we look at these three domains? Well, all of us may look at things differently, right? The important thing is to realize that the child or person is always developing within all of these domains pretty much at the same time. So let's say one of you noticed that a child was reaching for his father, like this picture here. Well, that's a physical change, right? The child is able to reach, but that reaching led to changes in his cognitive and social emotional abilities. His cognitive understanding, he starts to understand that if he reaches for his dad, he's going to get picked up. And he starts to put cause and effect together. Socially and emotionally, by reaching back, dad is strengthening their relationship. And he's showing him again that if you do this, you're going to get a positive result. So we could look at these individually, but really, again, they're all happening at the same time because we're always developing within all of these domains constantly throughout life. Here are our periods of development. So we will talk about prenatal development, which is from conception to birth of the baby. Infancy and toddlerhood, depending on the theorist that we're looking at, say that it's about birth to 2 or birth to 3. Early childhood then would be 2 or 3 to 6 or 7. Middle childhood is 6 or 7 to 11 or 12. Adolescence, 11 or 12 to 18. And that's where we're going to stop for this course. As you can see, that's a lot of periods of development that we already need to cover. Now, before we get into the next section of chapter one, which is about theories, what is a theory? So, a definition of a theory is that it describes behavior, explains behavior, and predicts behavior. Well, what does that mean? Theories are these orderly, integrated set of statements. Well, they're meant to do something specific. So I know we haven't talked about attachment theory yet. That comes in chapter 7, but I'm sure you've heard of attachment or at least having a relationship between parents and children. So let's say I'm a home visitor and I come to see this family, mom, dad, and baby. I can describe the infant behaviors. For example, maybe mom goes to leave the room to grab something and the baby starts to cry. Through theory, I can explain, what is happening. Well, the child is crying because he's starting to become strongly attached to his mother, right? So that bond is being developed. Then I can predict the consequences of this bond or the benefits. And this is actually a benefit. When the child cries but is comforted when mom comes back, that's actually a sign of secure and quality attachment. So, again, we can do a lot with theory. We can explain why things are happening. We can describe what's happening. We can predict. And all of this is in the avenue of helping children and families. Okay, so when we get to our theory chapters, I want you to think about, you know, are they continuous or discontinuous theories? Do they believe that there's only one course of development for all children, or do they believe there's many different possible courses? And what do they think in terms of the influence of nature and nurture in their theory? So, continuous development, those theorists believe that development happens like a smooth arc. We just keep adding on to what we already know and progressing on that arc like a smooth, gradual process. Well, discontinuous theorists believe development's very abrupt. When you're in the stage, it's somewhat calm, but then you hit a block and you have to take a big step into the next stage where a lot of changes are going to take place. So, again, as you look at those theorists that are covered in the next video, think about, is this a continuous theorist or is this a discontinuous theorist? Now, again, depending on the theory, they might believe that all children develop in similar ways, maybe through stages. So they might believe there's one course of development. Or maybe they believe, it depends on who your family is, what your culture is, who your environmental influences have been. Then that would believe many courses of outcomes of development for children. And lastly is the concept of nature versus nurture. So, nature refers to from birth, what happens to us, they believe, is happening because it's already written within our genetic information. We inherit our genetics from our parents, it's in our DNA, and it's innate and born within us for us just to act out what's written in our biology. So I have a picture here of twins, and again, they're going to look the same, have similar experiences in life because they have very similar genetic information, or in terms of identical twins, they have the same genetic makeup. Well, nurture understands the nature side, but they also think, there's a lot more to how we develop. It's not just written in our DNA. They also believe the environment influences our DNA. So it's not only experiences that we have after birth, like who our friends are, how we're parented, where we live, the culture we grow up in, but it's also experiences before we're even born. So think about it. What's something that you could experience while you're in your mother's womb? Well, in a few chapters, we'll get to something called teratogens, right? Environmental influences like alcohol, tobacco, things that are not so positive, but those are experiences that the child can have before they're even born that influence or change their biology. So again, when we talk about theory, think about, is this theory more on the nature side, nurture side, or both? All right, thank you for following along and email me with any questions.